What is the best joke you know? Guy walks into a bar and says to the bartender, "I'll show you something amazing for a beer." Bartender agrees. Guy pulls out a 10 inches pianist from his pocket and sets him on the bar. He starts playing beautifully. The bartender, wowed, demands, "Where the hell do you find that little man?" Guy says, "I've got a tiny wizard in my other pocket. For another beer, you can make a wish." Bartender agrees and says, "Wizard, I'd like 100,000 bucks." Suddenly the bar fills with 100,000 ducks. Bartender, confused and angry, says, "What the hell, mate? I didn't want 100,000 ducks." Guy responds, "Oh, you think I wanted a 10-inch pianist?" My all-time favorite to tell at parties: there was this man in Bulgaria who drove trains for a living. He loved his job. Driving a train had been his dream ever since he was a child. He loved to make the train go as fast as possible. Unfortunately, one day he was a little too reckless and caused a crash. He made it out, but one person had died. Well, needless to say, he went to court over this incident. He was found guilty and was sentenced to death by electrocution. When the day of the execution came, he requested a single banana as his last meal. After eating the banana, he was strapped into the electric chair. The switch was flown, sparks flew, and smoke filled the air. But nothing happened. The man was perfectly fine. Well, at the time, there was an old Bulgarian law that said a failed execution was a sign of divine intervention, so the man was allowed to go free. Somehow, he managed to get his old job back driving the train. Having not learned his lesson at all, he went right back to driving the train with reckless abandon. Once again, he caused a train to crash, this time killing 2 people. The trial went much the same as the first, resulting in a sentence of execution. For his final meal, the man requested 2 bananas. After eating the bananas, he was strapped into the electric chair. The switch was thrown, sparks flew, smoke filled the room, and the man was once again unharmed. Well, this of course meant that he was free to go. And once again, he somehow managed to get his old job back. To what should have been the surprise of no one, he crashed yet another train and killed 3 people. And so he once again found himself being sentenced to death. On the day of his execution, he requested his final meal: 3 bananas. "You know what? No," said the executioner. "I've had it with you and your stupid bananas and walking out of here unharmed. I'm not giving you a thing to eat. I don't know what the bananas do to help you stay alive, but we're strapping you in and doing this now." Well, it was against protocol, but the man was strapped into the electric chair without a last meal. The switch was pulled, sparks flew, smoke filled the room, and the man was still unharmed. The executioner was speechless. The man looked at the executioner and said, "Oh, the bananas had nothing to do with it. I'm just a bad conductor." What's the difference between a hippo and a zippo? One is very heavy, and the other is a little lighter. A proctologist walks into a bank. He needs to sign a document. He tries to sign, but he pulls a thermometer out of his shirt pocket. Oh shit. Some asshole has my pen. An Irishman walks into a pub. "What'll you have?" the bartender asks. "Give me 3 pints of Guinness, please," says the man. The bartender brings him 3 pints, and the man proceeds to sip them alternately. The first one, the next one, and then the third one, until they are all gone. He then orders 3 more. "Sir," says the bartender, "I know you like them cold. You don't have to order 3 at a time. I can keep an eye on you, and when you get low I'll bring you a fresh cold one." "You don't understand," the man says. "I have 2 brothers, one in Australia and one in the States. We made a vow to each other that every Saturday night we'd still drink together. So right now, my brothers have 3 Guinness stouts too, and we're drinking together. What a wonderful tradition," the bartender says, smiling. Every week after that, the man comes into the bar and orders 3 beers. But one week, he orders only 2. He drinks them and orders 2 more. "I know what your tradition is," says the bartender sadly, "and I'd just like to say that I'm sorry that one of your brothers died." "Oh, me brothers are fine," says the man. "I just quit drinking." A man goes to a funeral. He asks the widow if he could say a word. He goes to the front and says plethora and sits back down. The widow leans over and whispers, "Thanks. That means a lot." Edit. Thank you everyone. I gladly would on your lines when I retell this joke. You have all made my day brighter. My personal favorite one. A man comes up and asks to say a few words, and the widow gives him the okay. He steps up to the mic and says with confidence, "Waterpit." The widow gives a small smile. "Thanks, I know you mean well." As a Finn, I have a special fondness for Russian Soviet political jokes. A new arrival to Gulag is asked, "What were you given 10 years for?" "For nothing. Don't lie to us here, comrade." Everybody knows for nothing is 3 years. A judge walks out of his chambers laughing his head off. A colleague approaches him and asks why he is laughing. "I just heard the funniest joke in the world." "Well, go ahead. Tell me," says the other judge. "I can't. I just gave someone 10 years for it." Here's a favorite of mine regarding the Winter War. There is an army of Soviet troops at the crest of a hill, and all of a sudden from the other side they hear, "One Finn can kill 25 Soviets." The Soviet commander, enraged, sends over 25 men. Gunfire erupts and then stops. Then out of the stillness the same Finn speaks again. "One Finn can kill 50 Soviets." So the commander sends 50 men over again and the same result happens. Gunfire, then silence. Again the Finn shouts, "One Finn can kill 100 Soviets." In an absolute fury the commander sends in 100 men to dispatch the lone Finn. Gunfire erupts again and then silence. Only this time a Soviet soldier crawls back over the hill and shouts to his commander, "It's a trap. There are 2 of them." 3 men went to hell, and they stood before the devil. The devil asked the first man, "What did you do for a living?" The man answered, "I was a lumberjack." The devil said, "Then we will chop your penis off." He turned to the second man, asking the same question he asked the first. "I was a fireman," said the second man. "Then we will burn your penis off," said the devil. He turned to the third man, asking the same question he asked the other 2. The third man thought about it, and finally answered the devil, "I was a lollipop salesman." This one is a long one, but one of my all-time favorites and a classic. A businessman is getting ready to go on a long business trip. He knows his wife is always horny, so he decides to get her something to keep her occupied while he was gone, because he didn't much like the idea of her screwing someone else. So he went to a store that sold sex toys and started looking around. He thought about a life-sized sex doll, but that was too close to another man for him. He was browsing through the dildos, looking for something special to please his wife, and started talking to the old man behind the counter. He explained his situation to the old man. "Well, I don't really know of anything that will do the trick. We have vibrating dildos, special attachments, and so on. But I don't know of anything that will keep her occupied for weeks, except A," said the old man, and then he stopped. "Except what?" asked the businessman. "Nothing, nothing," said the old man. "Man, tell me. I need something," protested the businessman. "Well, sir, I don't usually mention this, but there is the voodoo dildo," the old man said. "The voodoo dildo?" the businessman asked. The old man reached under the counter and pulled out an old wooden box carved with strange symbols. He opened it, and there lay a very ordinary-looking dildo. The businessman laughed and said, "Big fucking deal. It looks like every other dildo in this shop." The old man said, "But you haven't seen what it'll do yet." He pointed to a door and said, "Voodoo dildo." The door. The voodoo dildo rose out of its box, darted over to the door, and started screwing the keyhole. The whole door shook with the vibrations, and a crack developed down the middle. Before the door could split, the old man said, "Voodoo dildo, box." The voodoo dildo stopped, floated back to the box and lay there, motionless. The businessman said, "I'll take it." The guy took it home to his wife, told her it was a special dildo and that to use it, all she had to do was say, "Voodoo dildo, my pussy." He left for his trip satisfied things would be fine while he was gone. After he'd been gone a few days, the wife was unbearably horny. She thought of several people who would willingly satisfy her. But then she remembered the voodoo dildo. She lay down, placed the box between her legs, and said, "Voodoo dildo, my pussy." The voodoo dildo shot to her crotch and started pumping. It was great, like nothing she'd ever experienced before. After 3 orgasms, she decided she'd cut enough, and tried to pull it out, but it was stuck in her, still thrusting. She tried and tried to get it out, but nothing worked. Her husband had forgot to tell her how to shut it off. So she decided to go to the hospital to see if they could help. She put her clothes on, got in the car and started to drive to the hospital, quivering with every thrust of the dildo. On the way, another orgasm nearly made her swerve off the road, and she was pulled over by a policeman. He asked for her license, and then asked how much she'd had to drink. Gasping and twitching, she explained that she hadn't been drinking, but that a voodoo dildo was stuck in her pussy, and wouldn't stop screwing her. The officer looked at her for a second, and then said, "Yeah, right. Voodoo dildo. My ass." A penguin is on a long-deserved vacation from the zoo. He decides to take a road trip out west, where his car breaks down. Luckily, it's right in front of a mechanic in town. He drops the car off and tells the mechanic he's going to get some lunch. It's a really hot day, so after eating he stops by the ice cream shop for a little treat. Walking back to his car, the mechanic tells the penguin, "It looks like you blew a seal." The penguin laughs. "Oh, no," he said, as he wiped his mouth, "it's just ice cream." One day 3 people were stuck on an island with cannibals. The cannibals said, "If you do what we say, we won't kill you." So the 3 people followed the orders the cannibals. So the cannibals said, "Go into the forest and pick 10 fruits of the first fruit you see." So the first person came back out of the forest with 10 apples. The cannibals said, "Put the apples up your ass," without making a facial expression. The person then made a facial expression after the second apple. So the cannibals killed him. The second person came back out of the forest with 10 cherries. The cannibals said, "Put the cherries up your ass," without making a facial expression. The person then started laughing on the 10th cherry, so they killed him. In heaven, the person with apples asked the person with cherries, "Why did you start laughing?" The person replied, "I saw the third person come out with pineapples." Stalin is sitting at his desk busy with paperwork when his assistant bursts into the room and says, "Comrade Stalin, there is a clairvoyant here that wants to see you. He claims he can see the future. Send him to Gulag," says Stalin. If he could see the future, he wouldn't have come here. My grandpa would tell this joke called the Yangtze River story. Relatives would look at me and say, "Get comfortable." He finally took the time to tell me at my cousin's wedding. There once was a family that lived on the Yangtze River. They had an outhouse right on the river, and one day, it was pushed off the bank and floated downstream. The father of the family lined up his 3 sons. Young, teen, and almost adult. They lined up, facing where the outhouse used to be. The father asked the boys one by one, "Did you push the outhouse into the Yangtze River?" The youngest turned his head to the left, staring at the house they all lived in. It was a big red house that they all worked together to paint last summer. It was cold now, with winter approaching and the paint needing another coat soon. The father went to the next boy, "Did you push the outhouse into the Yangtze River?" This son looked straight up, swallowing hard so that his throat made an audible sound. Finally, he asked his eldest son, "Did you push the outhouse into the Yangtze River?" The boy locked his father's gaze, but declared, "No, I did not." The father pulled out a pastry from the nearby village. "I'm going to tell you a story, and by the end, you will tell me who pushed the outhouse into the river." The boys all fidgeted, but were ready to hear their father's story. One day, a little boy chopped down his father's cherry tree. Instead of lying, he told the truth, and his father rewarded him, gave him candy, and he grew up to be George Washington, the President of the United States. Slowly, the youngest boy stepped forward. "It was I, father. I pushed the outhouse in the river." With a flash, the father had his youngest bent over his knee, his belt in his hand, lashing hard, crying out. The boy shrieked, You said. The father, George Washington's father, wasn't sitting in the cherry tree.